Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And welcome to Go Astros. I am your host, James Christopher. How about our new intro? Wasn't that awesome? We're going to be talking, we got Andy Tom Chesson coming on, Brian Arbor. Not sure which order. We're going to figure all that out later. But look, it's been frustrating to be an Astros fan. And anybody that's not being honest about that maybe needs to be. I think it's a great baseball team with all the talent in the world. I think that when it is a team playing the way that we know it can play, that there are very few teams that match up with it, really and truly. I think the Dodgers probably do, but they have their own issues of just deciding when not to play. And I think, Tampa Bay looks dominant. But listen, 23 games to go. I think that they're going to finish at 95 wins, win the division, and finish with the number 2 seed, which I think, it's funny how things work, but I'm always scared of a wild card team coming in to play you because, on the one hand, and the most obvious thing is you burn a pitcher, if you're the wild card team, you're probably at a more deliberate or specific disadvantage. But sometimes you're the team that gets hot and then you start mowing through people. So, I'm happy. I think we'll have the 2 seed. I think Minute Maid Park is going to rock. And I think one of the things that's going to really help the Astros when they get there, and I'm saying when, I'm not one of these people that's saying if, the playoff experience alone, I think is going to help it push past one. Minute Maid Park is going to intimidate people, but also when they do get out to, I'll say Tampa Bay, but like 8 people go, so it's going to be too scary. But Chicago might be loud. That's going to help them sustain the sort of, we get to pay them back for cheating bullshit that's going to happen. But again, we have a great show. Andy and Brian are here, so stick with us. Now joining us on Go Astros, I call him the smartest guy on Astros Twitter. He might disagree, but that's just because he's humble. Welcome to the show, Brian Arbor. All right, so we're jumping on with Brian Arbor on Go Astros. And, Brian, I made the comparison on Twitter. I'm a Cowboys fan, and this Astros team feels a lot like Barry Switzer's team right after Jimmy Johnson left, where glimmers of the same brilliant team, but underlying problems in the foundation. Am I wrong on thinking that's where we are?
Do we get a championship out of it like the Switzer Cowboys did?
I mean, possibly.
And if we can avoid the next 25 years of the Cowboys, that would be good too. But let's just have the analogy go for 1 year and 1 year only.
Yeah.
This is the team that's going to win about 95 games. That means it's not as good as the teams that won 100 games from 2017 to 2019. Oh, we know that, right? The ace pitcher is not Justin Verlander. The center fielder is Jake Myers and Chad McCormick, who both are fun stories. They're not George Springer. They're not an all-star level player. So it's not as good. On the other hand, 95-win teams are really good teams in baseball. 100-win teams are really the exception. And they are going to win the American League West and going to go to the playoffs and have as good a shot as anybody inside the playoffs. So, this is a team that is, this is a team that has as good a chance of winning the World Series as just about anybody, except maybe the Dodgers.
So you said winning 95 games. I mean, that means going 14-6, right? Do I have that right? 14-6 for the last, or is it 14-8?
That would be like they have 23 games left, so that would be 14 and I think if they go 500, they win 93 games. So it would be 2 games over 500.
I love how both you and I are not math majors, and that played out in this moment here. I just don't know, where is that level of consistency that we haven't seen? So, we have 23 games left. I guess that makes it 14-9. So maybe that's just right above what's about 600 ball, and they haven't played that for a while. What gives you the confidence that they are going to get that together?
Well, they played just about 600 ball over the course of the entire season. They do have this long stretch here where they're playing, a little bit below that. They had the nice stretch in July where they played a little bit above that. But I argue this is actually a very consistent team. They've been above 500 every single month of the season. On my blog, I usually sort of divide up the season into 6-6. And in each 6 of the season so far, each of the 5-6, they've been over 500. And that's actually hard to do. That's what good teams do, is even when they have a bad stretch, they're still a 500 to slightly above 500 team. So, you know, the A's aren't going to win 95 games. The Mariners are really lucky that they're going to win 88 games. This is the best team in the American League West, has been all season. So, that being said, yesterday was really frustrating, right?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. We would be in a very opposite emotional state, right, if we switched game 2 and game 3 of the Mariners series.
Yeah, I'm definitely not. Yeah, I am not definitely, I'm definitely not looking at it like a one game thing and boy, that sucked. If you would have told anybody realistic, the Mariners are hot and the baseball gods are playing for them. If you tell me you take 2 of 3, which is like the Mariners needed to sweep that series.
Yes.
You could argue the Astros needed to win a game in that series. And so I think clearly they ended up growing the lead to 5.5 games. My thing is like, I look at the calendar and I'll go, okay, now 3 against a very bad Angels team, 4 straight against a very bad Rangers team. And then the Diamondbacks are rolling in, that should be a stretch, or you should be able to win, what I just mentioned, 10 games, you should be 7-3 in that stretch. But sometimes this group doesn't give me the confidence that they're going to be 7-3 in that stretch.
Yeah. I mean, because they have not played as well against the lower set of teams in baseball over the season. They played much better against the better set of teams. And that is probably, we can sort of go through some of the psychology of that. I think mostly that's just flukish. That's just kind of happened the way that the ball is broken. And those are smaller samples sometimes. At the same time, it's like, hey, they had this big stretch in August where they played teams that were not in playoff position, and they were, a game above 500. So, it's not what we'd hoped going into that stretch, that they'd win 2 out of 3, that they'd win 7 out of 10, that they'd win some big number like that. And, so yeah, there's good reason to sort of say, I don't know that they're going to go 7-3 over the next set of games, other than, of course, particularly the Diamondbacks and Rangers have essentially given up on the season. And, the Rangers are playing, I don't know who 3/4 of these players are on the Rangers team right now. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to say the same thing about the Diamondbacks, who I don't look at all.
Yeah, I mean, no, you've got that. Let me ask you this. Let me ask about the offense. So it does look like for the first time we are seeing the offense together. Diaz is in a bit of a slump, but I still love the idea that you can essentially play Diaz 6 games a week and then therefore spell everybody around the diamond. But how important was it to see Altuve have back-to-back games with extra base hits, including some home runs, and more importantly, to see Bregman start to really hit the ball hard?
Yeah, I think those are absolutely great things. And Altuve had a bad month of August. He had like an 80 WRC plus, maybe even lower than that. So it's nice to see him hitting the ball with power. He hit a home run.
I believe I read somewhere that it looked like it might have been the worst month of his career.
Mm-hmm. And he had a particularly bad 2020. Well, it's only 2 months, so it's not the thing we should look at. Everything's weird about 2020 as a season. But yeah, wasn't a good month. We want him to be coming around and moving forward. And same thing with Bregman. It's a different issue, right? Okay, this guy's been on the injured list for 2 months, had the really weird situation where he started his rehab and then they had to stop his rehab and restart it, which left us all puzzled. And he came back and he's hitting the ball as far as getting, base hits and, strikes on judgment is always excellent. But he's hit 2 home runs in his last 2 at-bats. Apparently, it's going to be a big 57-82. That's the new Jewish New Year. And Major League Baseball's best Jewish player is celebrating it in good fashion.
I love that. And we would concur. He is baseball's best Jewish player. Let's talk a little bit outside the American League for a second. It does look like Tampa Bay's a juggernaut right now. But are you shocked at how bad the Yankees are playing? I know you have an eye on there since you and your wife both hate them. Are you surprised at how bad they've fallen off after their big win streak?
I mean, the win streak, right, was out of character and out of, maybe not out of their ability, right, but it is unlikely. The losing streak is somewhat unlikely. It speaks to something with the Yankees, which is we thought they'd be the best team in the American League walking into the season, and they haven't played that way throughout the season. Some of their, not necessarily the Starlos, but some of their second level players, guys like Gleyber Torres and DJ LeMahieu, have not played up to expectations. Their pitching has been okay. Garrett Cole is back to being Garrett Cole, but the other people on that staff are, people I'm not going to fear in an American League Championship Series if they end up playing the Astros in that.
Talk about fear. What is your concern level? Jose Urquidy did not look sharp yesterday. They said his velo was actually about what it had been, but he didn't really reach upper levels, but he was averaging about 92, 93. Just rust, you think?
I think that's probably it. It wasn't velo to me that was concerning to me. It was command. Urquidy throws a tons of strikes, one of the highest rates in all of baseball. Dusty said earlier this year he thought he was throwing too many strikes. You need to throw a few more balls out of the strike zone and induce people to chase. And he wasn't real good with his command yesterday. So that's something to watch in the future. It will be nice to get Zach Greinke back from the COVID IL, hopefully soon, and allow the pitching staff to have a little bit more. I assume they'll go to a 6-man rotation and allow a little bit more rest for the pitchers.
Yeah, it does seem like we need a 6-man rotation, and we do need to get the bullpen a little bit of rest. I wouldn't mind seeing an IL stint for Presley once this division's in hand, so that way he can take a little bit of a break.
There's only one more off after today. There's only one more off day in the season. So they'll have this long stretch of games here. And again, it's nice to have the 28-man roster and have an extra pitcher there and spread out the innings a little bit more.
Yeah, and I do think Graveman seemed to have bounced back since we had our discussion. He looked sharp the other night. So hopefully that's kind of working itself out.
Yeah. And with Presley, I just think it's, he gave up the big hit yesterday on a 2-hop grounder to, where the shift wasn't.
And all of Astros Twitter demanded the shift to be banned.
Yes. Which, I think any set of fans would be, in favor of the shift to be the ones that innovated this and have won so much with it. But, it is so noticeable when it doesn't happen. Right. But again, it's a bad 2 games for Ryan Presley, but it's not anything that has me majorly concerned about him. These things happen sometimes.
Okay, so this real quick then, who doesn't make the playoff roster? And I know that it can adjust. So who might, who's going to play in the divisional round versus who's going to play in the ALCS will be different. But who do you see being the odd man out on the pitching staff?
Okay, so who do we know is going to make it, right? So we know that 5 of the 6 starters are going to make it. One of them will go to the bullpen. Right?
Probably we know the bullpen right now.
Right, yeah. Okay. And then we can go from the pitching staff, we can go from the relievers. We'll start with the, it'll be, so that's 5. So we've got Presley, Stanek, Graveman, Yimi, Javier. Pretty sure Maton will make it here. So now we're up to 11. The question is what goes on with the next 2? Could just be Taylor and Raley because you've got your left-handed guys. Okay. On the other hand, if you don't think you're going to use your left-handed guys for all that much, you could end up with, I'm going to give you a radical idea for the 13th guy on the pitching staff here. It could be Jake Odorizzi, who's been, pitching relatively well recently, particularly the first time through the order. So if you're worried about having a long man, don't want it to be Brandon Bielak, which I think is a reasonable expectation. If you need someone out there to go a time through the order, Christian Javier is one of those guys, but Odorizzi could be that guy.
Yeah, I actually like that model. It was what worked so well in 2017, and I don't know the need for left-handed specialists in the days of the 3-batter minimum seem extraneous, particularly when one of those guys is Brooks Raley. I know his advanced stats say one thing, but the results say something completely different. So in a playoff situation, I'd probably much rather trust Odorizzi to sort of piggyback.
And Raley has really a really large platoon split. So I'm okay with Raley against the left-hander. But I worry greatly now about Raley against right-handers.
Right.
And with a 3-batter minimum, and almost, you can come in with 2 outs in an inning with the lefty, maybe in be a loogie. But anything beyond that is worrisome.
Yeah, well, we will be back next week with you, Brian. Hopefully, we'll have a better picture. We'll really be back in a couple of days, so we'll be back on Monday. But thanks for jumping on, and have a great weekend.
Good. And I should note, Friday is Ohtani versus Fromper, which is an excellent pitching matchup. So I look forward to talking about that next week.
Yeah, I hope that that Ohtani leads in the third inning. But anyway, there we go. And next up on Go Astros, he calls himself a full-time curmudgeon, but all that curmudgeonness goes out the window after an episode of Ted Lasso. Welcome to the show, Andy Tom Chesson. All right, so we're jumping back on with Andy Tom Chesson. And, Andy, the Astros have been a middling baseball team for about the last month that have done just enough to maintain their division lead. It's sort of accordioned, but it's about 5.5 games, which is about as big as I think it's seven games was the biggest it's been all season.
Right.
I asked that with, I don't know if the clubhouse is bugged. Is bothered by it. Excuse me. I've seen the fact that the team seems bored and is waiting for the playoffs, which is a whole other thing we'll get to in a second. Jake Odorizzi felt the need to complain to the media about being pulled after 66 pitches in the 5th inning. And someone said, oh, it was the heat of the moment. No, he got pulled in the 5th, and he waited till 2.5 hours later of an extra inning game to complain about it. First of all, is Jake Odorizzi right to be irritated to have been pulled out of the game?
Well, there's a school of thought, and I tend to agree with this to an extent that, yeah, he should be irritated, but I think he needs to be irritated at his season-long performance, which is really trailing back to last year. And he was hurt when he was his last year with Minnesota. He hasn't given the Astros coaching staff, front office, enough to have any faith built on for him this year. He's been a pitcher who in the 4th inning, in the 5th inning is going to blow up. And the situation that he doesn't want to talk about is there were 2 runners on with 1 runner out, and Kelenic was coming in, and Kelenic has squared up the ball on Odorizzi a couple of times pretty solidly this season. And so they didn't want to take the risk. So it wasn't a pitch count issue as much as it was Jake Odorizzi hasn't pitched well this season. And that's a situation where Dusty evidently is now trying to win games, which hasn't always been the case this year.
Yeah.
That they made a move, and I don't begrudge Dusty for making that move, and I don't think Brent Strom disagreed with the move. The overarching story is that you have a franchise that, even with Dusty Baker in charge, is very, very analytical still in their approach to how they use their pitchers. They clearly see something in the numbers, and it doesn't take much to see it. Once he goes the 3rd time through an order, the opposition has like a 1.400 OPS. So they're tattooing the balls on the third time through.
Yeah, and to your point, it looks like what happened was, I was looking at the box scores. Last time he faced Seattle, 5 great innings, gets to the 6th, immediately puts a couple guys on. Astros, I think, end up lose that game. This time, Dusty wasn't waiting around for it, regardless of what the pitch count was. And I applaud Dusty for actually adjusting to a game time situation, as opposed to sometimes when he doesn't do that.
Well, and we're to the point of the season. We're in September. There are 20 some odd games left. I don't have an exact count in front of me.
23
games left. We are past the point of letting people work through things, with the possible exception of Marwin Gonzalez. We should not be in a position, and I don't think Dusty or Brent Strom are in the position of waiting around for a pitcher to get it at this point. And so Odorizzi is what he is. He's going to continue to start. I doubt that's going to happen in the playoffs. He is going to go 4 innings and 5 if his pitch count's not too high, or he hasn't gone through the batting order more than twice. And then you see, and if you get a little bit extra out of him, great, but he needs to adjust his expectations, because the stats and the advanced stats and the eyeballs all say that 3rd time through, he's getting his ass kicked, and he needs to own that. The other side of that, as I started off, I like the fire out of him, because it's a whole lot better than what he was doing the first 2 months of the season, which was a whole lot of, well, I sucked. Oop, I sucked again. Boy, I really sucked that time. Sucks to suck. He actually said sucks to suck.
He did say sucks to suck. By the way, he said sucks to suck 2 starts ago. So, or 3, yeah.
So I get the frustration. He's a competitor. He wants to compete. Absolutely, probably hasn't ever been pulled at 66 pitches in a game he had a lead for in his life. But the reality is he's an older pitcher. He's on a team that relies on analytics, and he has not done well this year.
Yeah.
And those factors combined to a guy that has a short leash, and he's going to have a short leash every time he takes the ball.
The only way he doesn't have a short leash in that game, because he gave up 2 runs and all of a sudden it's tied. The only reason he doesn't have a short leash in that game is if it's 5-2, maybe then the Astro. But at a tie game, when these wins equal actual games in the standings, you're going to take that advantage. Now, here's the other thing for you that I want to ask you, because, I think most of the listeners know that you actually covered the Astros, were in clubhouses years ago.
Decades at this point.
Decades. We old. Does this kind of thing, the whole going to the press and being kind of a punk about it, does it affect the clubhouse? Does Odorizzi have the standing in the clubhouse to affect the clubhouse? Or is it just a thing is it a non-issue?
I think it's a non-issue with this team. A different team, it might be more of an issue, but with this team, you've got veteran guys. I saw a graphic yesterday, I think on MLB's Twitter account, that the Astros have the most playoff experience per man or overall in anybody who potentially is going to get a playoff spot this year, or at least in the American League. So more than the Yankees, more than the White Sox. They're an experienced veteran team at this point. So they're not going to sweat stuff like this. Odorizzi is a veteran. I don't think he has the standing in the clubhouse, but he's also a pitcher. And honestly, the position guys tend to blow off pitchers when they have concerns because they're pitchers. And they're a little bit weird. And, on the main show, Scott McIntyre can attest to, and is an example of how weird and out there, pitchers can be. So I think it's a non-issue for this team. If you're talking about the Pirates and you're looking for Odorizzi to provide veteran leadership to a rotation or to a pitching staff, that doesn't play as well. I think on this team, he's one of 11 or 14 guys, depending on how how many pitchers we're carrying. So it's just, he's disgruntled. And I think a lot of it you can look at and see he's disgruntled, not only from, he lashed out at the use, but he's got to be dissatisfied with his performance this year.
And look, nobody more than us fans or Dusty Baker wants the Odorizzi that made the All-Star team in 19. And if that guy shows up, it makes things completely different when we talk about the push to the playoffs. Let's talk a little Luis Garcia then. I mean, I think we had all been sort of prepared for the load management part of him. And I think we all want, I really see what the playoffs will look like might be Luis and Urquidy as tandem starters, particularly in that first round of the playoffs. But how much is it wearing on the bullpen and on the pitching staff with not being able to go to 6-man rotation, with Garcia doing his thing and then Odorizzi doing his thing?
In completely different reasons, completely different situations, but every inning that Luis Garcia pitches this season is a new career high in innings pitched. So every time he goes out, he is going farther than he's ever gone in a season. And that makes sense because if we were able to follow our actual development pattern, Garcia probably is in AAA this year, and he probably started the year in AA. He's still a really young guy.
For perspective, I joked with the voice of the Woodpeckers that I'm sorry we have all your pitchers.
Yeah. And he's not Juan Soto young, because who is? But he's a guy that is on a limited pitch count. I think some fans still don't understand that. Maybe they don't follow as close. And he's a guy that once he gets to about 70 pitches, they're going to pull him. And that's developmental reasons. He's a long-term play in the rotation for the Astros. I absolutely understand what they're doing. But what happens is you have 2 starters every 5 days that you can't count on to go more than 5 innings. And I mean, that's a hope you get them to 5. I think part of Odorizzi's issue was they couldn't qualify for the win because he got pulled before he completed 5.
Yeah.
But with Garcia, it's understandable, but the overall picture is you've got a bullpen that knows they're going to be working at least 4 innings twice through the rotation every time. And that's a lot of innings to put on guys. And so you see things like you saw in yesterday's game versus Tuesday. Tuesday's game, where the same high leverage pitchers were used in Tuesday and were able to shut down the Mariners. You see them Wednesday afternoon, the same four guys, and they couldn't do anything. And gave up a lead and gave up a bunch of runs at the end because Presley in a non-save situation is not Ryan Presley.
He's every closer. Isn't that weird?
He's every closer.
Every closer.
Well, we've seen that before. Brad Lidge was the same way.
Brad Litch was the same way. Punched himself in the face. Giles was the same way.
Yeah, Kenneth Giles. So that's the that's the issue that the Astros face. I think it fixes itself in the playoffs if you can find some way to mitigate the innings. And the only way you can do that to mitigate the innings the bullpen is pitching is start winning games. Because if you start winning games and start scoring a lot of runs, then your starting pitcher has a longer leash, then you have to use your bullpen less. If you have a 10-run lead going into the 9th or 8th, you don't have to pitch Graveman and Presley twice in the series. So, it's a team game. So if your hitters hit and they're scoring runs, you've got a lot better pitching staff.
Okay, let's talk.
Conversely, the offense has been really tight, and it feels, oftentimes like a hose with a kink in it. Sometimes you get that kink worked out and they score 11 runs like they did Monday night. Sometimes you don't, and it's the Padres series or the Seattle series last week where they got shut out twice.
I'm hopeful with Bregman and Altuve getting their swing back, and they did score 11, 5 and 5. 5 runs should win you a game.
Yes.
Anytime. So, but let's go back to pitching for a second. One of the warning flags that I have been sort of screaming about is the mismanagement of Christian Javier, of taking Christian Javier and having him not stay stretched out. Because that would have alleviated the problem with either, if Luis Garcia is on a 70 pitch count, why wouldn't you just plan for Javier to be your guy to take you to the 8th inning or maybe even the 9th, depending. And instead we've essentially really devalued. I don't trust Javier anymore, when before, for the first 2 months of the season, he was arguably one of the best pitchers if you remember, the whole Luis or Javier to the bullpen was actually a pretty heavily debated thing because we really weren't sure which one would go.
Well, and I think Javier to the franchise has higher upside. And I think that's part of where that decision came from. They needed to develop him as a starter. Garcia has higher upside. Javier has the ability to rebound a little bit quicker. Where we failed as a franchise this year is that, to your point, Christian Javier was supposed to keep being stretched out and not really a tandem start in the major leagues, but he was a guy that was supposed to be counted on to, if the game got out of hand or your starting pitcher went down, could go 3, maybe 4 innings out of the bullpen and be solid. Instead, he's turned into a 1-inning guy because we never used him in that long relief role. Yeah. He comes in very juiced up because of that, very excited, not to the Anoli Paredes level of excitement where he can't see straight. And I think he needs a shock collar more than anything else to straighten him out. Just calm down. Calm down. Maybe a spray bottle like you do.
Dusty just goes out with I now need that, by the way.
But with Javier, he can't throw strikes right now because he has no control, because I think he's really amped up. And I think his pitches play when he's a little bit more tired or more a routine use pattern. And I think it's not his fault, but it's regrettable because he's become a very uncertain member of the bullpen.
Sure.
And as young a guy as he is, that's got to affect his confidence. That's got to affect what he's willing to throw in certain situations. And as good as Martin Maldonado is, you can't count on him to coax every single pitcher through every single at-bat or appearance to get the best out of him. Because sometimes pitchers, to my earlier point, they're weird and they're kind of a mixed bag. And I think when you're a young guy, it's really easy to get inside your head and worry about where your pitch is going to land versus where it's going to hit in the strike zone.
Yeah, I mean, we're basically talking about Dusty having mismanaged a bullpen.
Which is, one of my favorite new things on Twitter this year is people defending Dusty Baker.
Anytime he makes,
anybody who criticizes him is wrong for some of Astros Twitter. Doesn't matter what Dusty has done. I think Dusty almost has the Trump ability to kill somebody in Times Square and still have people going, no, but it's Dusty Baker. The reality is Dusty Baker has a history prior to coming to Houston of mismanaging bullpens. And he continues to show that. Maybe he didn't show it as much last year because it was a 60-game season and his machinations didn't really come to fruition. But what you have now is literally a bullpen that's been mismanaged and is coming into September and October, hopefully, tired and not sure of everybody's role. And, how do you use Phil Maton? How do you use Yimmy? How do you use Graveman? Is Graveman okay? There's a lot of questions there, and that's supposed to be your 4 guys. And what do you get out of Ryan Stanek every start, every appearance? Because it's, again, kind of a mixed bag. Where does Javier fit in there? Where does Odorizzi fit in there if he's going to be in the bullpen? So there's a lot of questions still, more questions than you hope that you have in the second week of September, heading into a potential playoff appearance.
Yeah, and I'm sort of the opinion that Odorizzi probably makes more sense to make the roster in the playoffs because I feel like you can use him for the first third, for the first time through the order, like in a sort of extended relief appearance, than say Brooks Raley.
Yeah.
Those are your choices.
If Major League Baseball had conspired to eliminate the need for left-handed specialists, Brooks Raley would have a very strong role in this team. But the fact is, you put a right-handed hitter in front of him, he's going to give up a hit. He's going to give up a base runner. Odorizzi, I think, has value, either, as you say, as a limited starter or the long reliever that we haven't had all season, because potentially you're going to need that. And maybe he's the guy that you tandem with Garcia. Veteran experience in the playoffs certainly doesn't hurt. So, I don't see them leaving him off the playoff roster, but I don't know what his role is. And
all I know is the last time we had a pitcher mad at us that we left off a playoff roster, they burned it down. So I'd like to do whatever we can do.
Well, you certainly don't want a Mike Fire situation.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I don't think Jake Odorizzi dates middle schoolers. So it's a different personality type.
There we go. What did you see out of Bregman and Altuve the last 2 games? I mean, do you feel like it's a situation of getting hot in September and starting to roll through?
Bregman was hitting pretty well before he went out in June and missed 2.5 months of the season. I think Bregman is a guy that I don't worry about from a timing perspective. And a lot like George Springer, he has the ability to get kind of ungodly hot and stay that way for a few weeks. And realistically, at this point of the season, what you hope for is that everybody is healthy in your lineup. Everybody is seeing the ball well. And then you take talent over talent. And I think in the American League, we've got as much talent hitting wise as anybody that we're going to potentially play. So you hope everybody's healthy and you hope they can get some consistency in the lineup. But I'm, encouraged with Altuve. I know when he starts hitting for power, he sacrifices a little bit of average, but I don't necessarily know that that's a bad thing.
It's a weird thing with this lineup because, it seems like everybody's hitting the ball hard, either right at people or so hard that they're not getting, like at one game they had 10 singles and scored 2 runs as a result. And it's almost like they're hitting it so hard, it's taking good bounces off walls right into outfield. I mean, it's been very, very frustrating to watch, not just from an execution, but from a results perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, but I like Alvarez's approach at the plate lately. I like Bregman's approach since he's come back, and he's obviously, hit 2 home runs and pretty important couple of other base hits since he's been back. Altuve's had 2 home runs in the last 2 days. Correa looks good at the plate right now. Yuli is doing Yuli things. I'm always going to say we need to trade him, but that's a whole different
That's now luck. That's just good luck.
That's what needs to happen. And so I'm not worried about the lineup necessarily. If they get hot, we're going to do well. If they stay within themselves, we're going to do well. If they don't hit, we're not. But that's true of literally any team.
Yeah.
So, I like our chances there. I'm more concerned about what happens the rest of the scheduled games because we've played 500 balls since the middle of July. really since the All-Star break, certainly since August 1st. These aren't short time periods. And so right now, this is a team that plays 500 ball. And if we play 500 ball, this is 90, 91 wins with what's left on the season. So is that enough to win the division? Is that enough to keep a wild card? I don't think anybody believes that we're not going to win the division at this point with a 5.5 game lead. However, we still have 3 with Oakland at the tail end of the season, right before a series with the Rays that I hope we don't have to care about. So it's a little bit concerning. I still think, they probably win the division, but they've lost the ability to rest guys, and somebody should tell Dusty because he keeps resting guys. They've lost the margin for error with where they are in September. The lead's not big enough for them to go into coast mode. Hinch, and I know nobody wants to hear about what AJ Hinch would have done, but Hinch had these guys primed by the time they got to the playoffs. I don't know that Dusty has this team primed at this point, and there's still 3 weeks in the season, so maybe he can get there, but I'm dubious about that right now.
Yeah, it's weird. I have no concern. I mean, I really feel like the Athletics are cratering, and I think they lose the game they lost. They won last night. If anybody but Dallas Keuchel starts, you and I both know how that has gone lately. Right. Mariners scare you because a team can get hot. I don't know. Like they have to be, I think, 14-9 to reach the 95 win threshold, which I think will win the division. I agree. I don't know that 90 does it. I also don't know that 90 gets you the wild card because for as much as, if you think about what has to happen for the Astros to lose the division, it means they lose a lot of games. I don't know that you can count on Boston and New York to continue to lose that same amount of games.
And don't sleep on Toronto. Toronto is
really,
really, really well. Finally, maybe up to their potential, even without George Springer. I don't think he's back.
No, he is, but he's limited, he's a shell of himself. But he's still getting hits. But it's just
But that's I watching Toronto. I really see them taking one of those wild card spots, and I really hope it's from the Yankees because nothing would make me happier than watching them not make the playoffs and watching their Twitter pretend they didn't care.
It's a very schizophrenic fan base on Twitter. It went from we're never going to win again to never going to win
13 straight. We've already won the World Series.
Woohoo, yeah. Whereas Les Astros del Norte are taking care of business.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the way the schedule sets up because this version of the Astros tends to play down to their competition. And for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 series, we don't play a team with a winning record. And in fact, the Rangers and the D-backs, who have 6 of those games, are the couple of the worst teams in baseball this year. The Angels are below 500, but we played them 7 times. You always have to worry about Ohtani, taking over a game, I guess. I don't worry about the Angels actually winning games a lot because they never do. But, this is the time of year where we need to get out of caring about who we play and playing our best game.
Well, I think you're exactly right. I think we're going to have to see an Astros team that we saw at the beginning of the season. It's been a frustrating season for me to watch as a fan. I made the comparison and I made it to Brian Arbor in another segment. Like it feels like watching the Barry Switzer Cowboys where it doesn't feel like it used to feel. And it feels like any one little thing just derails you. He pointed out that they still won a championship and he'd take it. So, okay. I would too, but yeah, it's the Astros own their own destiny. And if they're going to win that destiny, then they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to spank. Like the Angels series is going to be competitive because Ohtani, like you said, can take it over. They're going to have to spank the Texas Rangers. They're going to have to spank Arizona because those 7 teams have given up. And there's no chance that Tampa Bay shows up, who I think probably is the best team in the American League. I mean, I think and it's the only team I think the Astros don't match up well with because the White Sox have injuries and they've scuffled as much as we have. The fact is the Rays are going to show up with something to play for. So it's not going to be anything less than a dogfight when they get here.
I agreed. And that's what concerns me. I think we talked a little bit ago about the Astros believing that they can turn things on when the playoffs start. They really need to do that starting with the next series.
And I think that's that's such a dangerous mindset to have in baseball when you're playing that third part of the game, which is the game. I think like you and I are both fans of college football teams that are relatively prominent and very talented. Like, yeah, you can let a small Division II school hang around for a bit and then decide it's time to squash them. I don't think it works that way in baseball all the time.
Yeah, college football is a whole different animal. I mean, to your point, you can be my school, Texas A&M, and dick around with Kent State for 2 quarters and then decide that, all right, now we're going to start playing football. Baseball doesn't work that way. And it's, and this is just me sitting here on my couch, literally guessing at what's happening, but that's what it looks like to me. That's what it feels like to me. And I think they learned it last year that we just need to get in the playoffs and then we can go full bore. And they did that against the Twins. They did that against the A's. They tried to do that against the Rays, but the Rays, beat them. And I think that was a great series. I question whether or not we're going to make it that far this year unless something dramatic happens. We could absolutely have the talent to do it. I just don't know if we have the mental game locked down the way we have in years past.
I think the Astros season stops probably at the ALCS. I think that they're looking at the 2 seed. I think they'll hold on to the 2 seed, and I think that we already saw the difference between playing Chicago at home versus playing Chicago on the road, and it does look like they're going to be missing possibly 2 of their big arms. So, but I don't know. Baseball's weird; anything can happen. But and of course, we should point out that the 2017 Astros was probably the weakest of those 3 teams, right?
Yep.
And they're the ones who won it all. So who knows? What percentage? Like, where do you sit? Like, what odds would you give, or what percentage would you assign to the Astros actually winning the division this year?
I was told there would be no math on this debate. 70% of the teams that lead their division at the All-Star break go on to win the division. You ask me at different times, I may have different levels of despair. Like if you asked me after the stupid loss yesterday, I was pretty convinced we probably weren't making the playoffs or we'd lose the wild card game.
I think you thought we were going to get relegated, not be able to finish the season. Like,
there's a lot to the last.
Welcome to AAA.
I'm trying to learn more about the Premier League and the Champions League. You're in the Premier League, but if you lose, you go to the Champions League. I love this game.
I don't get it. Yeah.
I think the reality is they hold on to win the division. I think they get past the first round of the playoffs, but I think anything past that is a crapshoot. It'll be very interesting to see because we don't match up with Tampa Bay well, although we did at the beginning of the season. We actually won games in that horrible stadium that they have in St. Pete's for the first time in forever.
Yeah.
So I think Tampa Bay has too much pitching and just enough hitting, just like they did last year, for us to overcome that right now. So, I think that we match up well with the White Sox. And if you play favorites, we win the division. We probably win that first round of the playoffs. And then I think we're dumped because, the records are what they are. Now, having said that, baseball playoffs are the biggest crapshoot of any professional sport. A hot Toronto team could come out of the wild card and absolutely hand it to Tampa Bay. And that would be an interesting ALCS if you follow my train of thought. It's Houston against Houston Light.
I love it. I'm all about it. Well, Andy, we're going to be back on Monday, man, and hopefully we'll be talking about the Astros taking at least 2 of 3 from a pretty decent but really underperforming LA Angels team.
I mean, that is in their name, isn't it? Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, who are underperforming and pretty decent.
Hey, but you know what? We can at least give props to being the only professional baseball team or professional team from Los Angeles to have an original name instead of the name they carpetbagged from somewhere else.
So many trolleys in Los Angeles.
And lots of lakes, too. That's the worst part about LA traffic. It's getting around all the lakes. So that does wrap up this episode of Go Astros. I want to thank really quickly Brad Stewart, who is a filmmaker friend of mine, animator. He's the one who did the sweet new opening animation of our logo. Brad, thanks so much. If you looking for that kind of work, hit me up and I will put you in contact. Really good guy, very, very talented and fast, which is Good when you're talking about an animator, not so much when you're talking about your love life. That is the episode. We will be back in just a few short days, hopefully to talk about an Astros sweep over the weekend. Until then, go Stros.